Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. This week, Groundhog Day for the media and the Bush administration.
Well, a militia group linked to terror being backed by Iran and setting up camp on America's doorstep.
Fox News bangs the war drums, this time for Iran. The Japanese media and their new lack of respect for politicians. And George W. Bush with his take on a U2 favorite.
It's Sunday.
Welcome back. The fact that you've heard it all before doesn't make it any easier to take. Here at The Listening Post, we've often reported on the White House's penchant for getting its message out through friendly news organizations. This week, we're looking at the Bush administration building a case through the media to attack Iran. Its ally in this, once again, Fox News. That's our starting point this week, how the U.S. government may be preparing us for a war with Iran. And we'll look at the counteroffensive, the fight back that's happening in new media to stop the war before it begins. President Bush this past week on Iran and the nuclear issue.
In Iran's active pursuit of technology that could lead to nuclear weapons threatens to put a region already known for instability and violence under the shadow of a nuclear holocaust.
The White House tries to set the tone on Iran, the Iranian nuclear program, and the prospect of going to war. And when the Bush administration's supporters spread the word, their first media port of call is often the most watched 24-hour news channel in America, Fox.
I feel that this is the most dangerous country in the world.
Unless the Iranians know that America means business, they're just going to keep moving.
Do you think the world understands how evil this regime is?
It all echoes the media buildup to the Iraq War. Only this time there are some new voices in the information mix, like foxattacks.com.
Well, a militia group linked to terror being backed by Iran and setting up camp on America's doorstep.
We want to activate, energize, and actually educate the hundreds of thousands of Americans committed to peace who care about the issue.
How do they do that? By simply monitoring Fox News, compiling the video evidence, and throwing it on YouTube.
Fox is once again, exactly as they did with the Iraq War, trying to scare us, fear-mongering, and warmongering.
10 kilotons in a refrigerator in a cargo container could kill 1 million people.
Over the last month, we've seen enough in the media. We're seeing the increase of the drumbeat.
It is too late to stop Iran's nuclear program.
We're seeing the increase of the accusation.
The attacks are connected to al-Qaeda, but is Iran pushing the terror buttons?
We're seeing the increase of the stories being leaked. And that's exactly the pattern with Iraq, by the way. It started over the summer, and then in the fall, they launched a heavy media offensive to convince everyone we had to go to war.
Iran continued to defy the UN by refusing to answer questions about its nuclear program.
Robert Greenwald's group is not working alone on the web. Among the latest new media players on this issue, a group that calls itself StopIranWar.com.
We're here to talk about something that's very, very important right now. We're approaching the last moments in which the administration can change its policy and head off a looming confrontation with Iran. And we're asking you to come to our new website to learn about what's going on and to learn how you can take action and be involved.
Part of the White House's strategy has been its plan to designate Iran's Revolutionary Guard as a terror group. That story was leaked to the U.S. media in mid-August.
This is the beginning of a long process, and if we remember the lead up to Iraq, it really was a 2-year process. So this is clearly another salvo in trying to create enough confusion in the media. That has to start now in order for something to proceed on the ground in maybe 6 or 8 months. The same thing would hold for the international media. Now, I think the Bush administration knows full well that the international media is not going to support this invasion. But again, if you can just put enough smoke out there.
Trying to clear up that smoke, some international news organizations based in Europe. They've traveled to Iran and done their best to cover the story there, despite reporting restrictions imposed by the Iranian government.
I don't personally expect neutral coverage from the United States about Iran, and part of that is because they have a whole policy on embargoes and so on. And I realised when I was in Iran that Europeans are there, as journalists, as business people, and the Americans are not. There's this huge kind of chasm really between the two governments, and I think that means American news journalism just can't be there and doesn't have the trust. There's too much politics there, and I don't think the Americans get anything in the way of genuine news coverage on Iran.
Because you have Europeans going to Iran all the time and having first-hand knowledge of Iran, it's much harder to present Iran in the kind of demonized axis of evil way that is done all the time in the American media.
And he doesn't just mean Fox. One of the best-known reporters at CNN, which is losing the ratings war with Fox, has acknowledged that.
My station was intimidated by the administration and its foot soldiers at Fox News.
The problem is that the networks are all influenced and affected by each other. And we've seen with Fox using its right-wing ideological convictions over and over and over again, and the others have followed suit.
Robert Greenwald's group at Fox News has an open letter campaign to remind other networks of their journalistic responsibility to avoid following Fox down the road to another war. Will the campaign work? Recent history would suggest otherwise. Our Global Village Voices now with their views on that story.
If you look back to the wake of 9/11, I think it was inevitable that there would be a welter of support in the American media, particularly on the right, for the invasions of Iraq and all the more so of Afghanistan. I think if you compare that to what's happening today, the responses from the American media are far more measured, far more considered, in part because there is less panic about the situation.
To put it simply, Fox is basically the biggest culprit out there. But Fox is the George W. Bush of the Western media outlets. Take someone like CNN or BBC. They're the Bill Clintons or the Tony Blairs of news coverage. They are doing the same thing. They attacked, Africa and Somalia. They destroyed Bosnia. They attacked Iraq. But they're doing it in a different way.
What's really happening is that the media often see themselves as a change agent, a force to change governments. I mean, if they show themselves to be anti-establishment, as they quite often do in the West, then it leads for a more sensational story. That also leads, unfortunately, to the idea that that could raise the stock price. Now, this is the problem with a lot of American media. It is based on those quarterly results. So, unfortunately, sensationalism has triumphed over journalism.
If you have a smart take on global media and the way they or we cover the world, then email us at listeningpost@aljazeera.net. We're always on the lookout for more Global Village voices and fresh perspectives on what's wrong with the media. Time now for some Listening Post news bites. Almost a year after she was shot dead, Russian prosecutors have finally announced a breakthrough in the Anna Politkovskaya murder case. Politkovskaya was the investigative journalist killed after publishing stories critical of the Kremlin and President Vladimir Putin. Russia's prosecutor general said 10 people had been arrested in the case, including officers of the Federal Security Service, the FSB, the successor to the KGB. He also pointed to Kremlin enemies abroad, echoing statements from the Russian government that Politkovskaya's death was ordered by former oligarchs who have fled Russia and now want to discredit the current leadership in an attempt to regain power. Politkovskaya's murder shocked Russian journalists and focused concern about press freedoms and the treatment of government opponents in Russia. An Egyptian blogger and an investigative reporter from Myanmar have scooped awards for raising the standards of media excellence in their countries. Both have been recognized by the International Center for Journalists. Wael Abbas is the first blogger to win the award. He has broken stories largely ignored by the Egyptian media, and his first-hand reports have often been picked up by mainstream news outlets. Similarly, May Thinyan Hain from Myanmar stood out for her coverage of taboo topics such as corruption and HIV/AIDS. She also forced officials through her reporting to acknowledge a bird flu outbreak in Myanmar. Both winners operate in environments where reporters take risks by doing their jobs. Now here's a development that might make you want to think twice before you edit a Wikipedia page. Wikiscanner is a new online tool that can reveal the identities of anybody who writes for Wikipedia, the open source encyclopedia. The tool trawls a list of 5.3 million edits and can then match them to the rough web address of the person doing the writing. Global media have been feasting on this story. Turns out that computers at the CIA have been responsible for edits on subjects such as President Ahmadinejad of Iran, and government computers in the UK and Canada have also been found to have been involved in editing politically sensitive material, as has the Vatican. Spokespeople for Wikipedia don't seem to have a problem with Wikiscanner. They say the tool will improve transparency and help reveal conflicts of interest. Sometimes when a joke gets lost in translation, it can be embarrassing. Here's a case of the Chinese media failing to spot a spoof and running it as real news. This image of a brain scan made its way into an article on multiple sclerosis written by the Chinese news agency Xinhua. It was lifted from US media. But any viewer of The Simpsons would have spotted the distinctive profile. That's Homer. And his brain is depicted by a peanut. Xinhua, by the way, is China's official state-run news agency. Coming up after the break, the Japanese media gang up on their government.